The kids have been spending the last month or so in Athens, and so I thought it would be appropriate to preach out of something that Paul wrote. You met Paul, right? Fun guy, right? And so I'm actually going to be preaching out of 1 Corinthians 3 this morning. I'm going to be talking about not little growths, but actually talking about spiritual growth and what that looks like. Just to give you some context, Corinth is it's very close to Athens. It's, if Athens is like Los Angeles, Corinth would be like Burbank. And so, I know it's over there on the left. You've got Athens. I don't know if you can see it, and then right kind of next to it, it's basically on an isthmus. It's like a connecting peninsula. Away from Athens, but they're very close, and then all the way down, across the Mediterranean, that's where Egypt is, and then you've got Jerusalem that's over down there in the bottom right-hand corner. So, and then Italy would be over there on the left, and it's kind of hard to see what Corinth looks like, and so I made a close-up. That's Corinth. So I did it a little bit too close, but. Those are the ruins. That's what the ruins of Corinth look like right now, and so I think that's the Mediterranean out there, and then Athens is close by. So, questions? No? Okay, good. So that's where Corinth is. Paul had a real heart for the people of Corinth. He went there at least 3 times on extended stays, and he really discipled the people of Corinth and the Christians who lived in Corinth. And we call those people the church in Corinth. He spent a lot of time with them, and he wrote them probably several letters. We have 2 of them, 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians. And so preaching out of 1 Corinthians, the first letter that we have, Paul kind of starts off early on in the letter by talking about how gifted they are. And he notes, you're very spiritually gifted, and you've got kind of all these things going for you. You're very blessed. So he builds them up, and you know what happens after you've been built up, right? You get torn down a little bit. And so he pretty much immediately follows that up by talking about their divisiveness. The Christians in Corinth were very, they were creating factions, basically, and they were saying, we side over here, we side over here. And unity was incredibly important in the early church, and so they were dividing themselves, and it was very divisive. And Paul talks about how that's basically, it comes out of their spiritual immaturity. And so while they thought that they were, scholars and theologians, Paul ends up telling them, you're really not. And so he leads up to chapter 3, and he kind of, as he gets there, he develops this idea of there being basically 3 types of people. Okay, there's people who don't have a relationship with Jesus. There's people who have an undeveloped relationship with Jesus. And there's people who have a developed, mature relationship with Jesus. So you got those 3 types, and he spends the latter part of chapter 1 and then into chapter 2 talking about the first type, people who don't have a relationship with Jesus. And he basically says, if you don't have a relationship with Jesus, you don't understand spiritual stuff. You don't get it. In one of my favorite verses, 1 Corinthians 1:18, he says, for the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it's the power of God. As Christians, we look at our faith and we go, yeah, it makes sense, right? But if you've ever talked to an atheist, they go, doesn't make any sense. You believe without knowing, that doesn't make any sense. But to us, it makes perfect sense. The message of the cross, what Jesus did on a cross, makes sense to us because we've been redeemed by it. We've been touched by that act. We are participating in that with Jesus, and so it makes sense. But if you don't have that, people are like, a guy died on a cross and it saved you from something like that. How does that work? But it makes perfect sense to us, and there's a perfect peace that we have in understanding that. We don't have to know here's exactly how it worked. You see the particles from the thing, or whatever. We don't have to have some kind of scientific understanding of how redemption works. But if you don't have faith, if you don't have Jesus, it's foolish. It's just foolishness. That's all it seems to you. And so, but he kind of leads into chapter 3, which is what the sermon is this morning when I get there. He leads into it talking about the first type, and then chapter 3 is all about the second two types of people. People who have an undeveloped relationship with Jesus, and people who have a developed, mature faith. So, here we are, and most of us are, hopefully a part of those last two categories. And so I'm hoping that this is going to be incredibly relevant. Right there at the beginning of 1 Corinthians 3, if you've got it, or in your bulletin, or on your phone, or in your Bible, he says, "But I, brothers, could not address you as spiritual people, but as people of the flesh, as infants in Christ." So let's just stop there. That would have been pretty surprising, kind of a slap in the face to the Christians in Corinth who had been being poured into, and they were like, this are all the Christians in this community. And he's saying, you guys have all these spiritual gifts and you're very blessed, but you're still babies in your faith. And so that probably would have rocked their world a little bit. And he says, "I fed you with milk, not solid food, for you were not ready for it. And even now you're not ready, for you're still of the flesh. For while there is jealousy and strife among you, are you not of the flesh and behaving only in a human way?" He says, look, you guys haven't grown up since last time we talked. You haven't matured in your faith. I gave you milk. I gave you basic baby food, right? I gave you formula, and then you guys just stuck with formula. You didn't get past that. You guys didn't start giving yourselves baby food and then crackers and stuff like that. I have a 1.5-year-old, so I'm down. But he says you guys haven't grown up. And the first thing that I notice out of this passage is that Paul's being very sensitive to where they are spiritually. He's not just assuming that they've grown, or he's not kind of just giving them the benefit of the doubt, like, oh, maybe that was just that one time or that one thing that I heard about. He's being very sensitive to where they are. So the first thing is, we're at different places in our spiritual journey, and you have to recognize that. And you have to recognize that for yourself, is to understand where you are on that journey. Are you kind of in an undeveloped phase, or do you have a mature faith? And within there's this whole spectrum where you could be. So you have to know where you are, because you have to stretch yourself to be somewhere else. You have to push yourself to be not just where you are, but to go beyond that. And so if you're on milk and you never go beyond milk, you're always going to be on milk, and you're never going to develop. I like that he talks about it in terms of infants, that infants have, milk, and it kind of draws out the difference between spiritual development and like physical human development. Because just physically, if you just keep giving a kid milk, he'll just keep growing up, right? He'll keep getting bigger, and you don't actually have to teach him like how to walk. Like eventually, when he turns 12, he should be able to walk, whether you taught him or not, right? And so that just happens naturally. But spiritually, you don't get spiritually more mature just with age. It's not how it works. You don't just like, oh, well, I got saved 10 years ago, and so I'm a 10-year-old Christian, and we don't have separate classes for all the 10-year-old Christians and the first-year Christians, because that's not how it works. You get out of your faith development what you pour into it. It takes work. You have to work it. And so Titus 2:11 and 12 says, "For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions and to live self-controlled, upright, godly lives in the present age." It's training. If you have Jesus, that's great. That's phenomenal. You've got Jesus in your life, but if you're not doing anything with it, it's like having a gym membership and just never going. It's not doing anything for you just by sitting in your pocket, right? You got to go and work it. And so it doesn't just happen. And so I love that Paul kind of draws that out by talking about their spiritual infancy. And he continues on in verse 4. He says, for when one says, I follow Paul, and another, I follow Apollos, are you not being merely human? What then is Apollos, and what is Paul? Servants through whom you believed, as the Lord assigned to each. And this is the kind of divisiveness that they were going through. They would say like, oh, well, I am of Paul. And they were like, well, I'm of Apollos. And they go, well, yeah, but I'm of Paul. And they would just had this kind of this dissension and the conflict there. It was like an artificial conflict. There was no conflict. Paul's saying, look, well, what does that even mean? I follow Paul, I follow Apollos. We were just sent here from God. It would be silly to say, like, oh, you got one messenger from, well, you got an email from your boss, and then you got another email from your boss to be like, I follow the first email. Like, oh, no, I follow the second email. Like, we all got the same 2 emails, like, and they're not in conflict. What's your problem? But there are some people, and maybe you know someone, maybe you are someone, they just really like conflict. They're like, oh, did you know that? Mm-hmm. And you go, oh, whoa, I didn't know that. And so there's some people that just kind of, they thrive in that. Is that you? Okay. It's some of you. I'm going to say it's some of you. But that's how the Christians in Corinth were. They kind of, they needed that conflict. And that's there was like their daily soap opera. It's like, oh, did you hear that Susie's following Apollos now? So you can read about Apollos in Acts 18. He's a very cool guy, very cool story. Maybe another day. But essentially what you need to understand is that Paul came and shared the gospel in Corinth, and when people converted, he discipled them for a little bit and then left, and then Apollos came in after him, and he discipled them also, and then he left. And so you had people who were there, and they weren't the only 2, but you had people that were there that were like, oh, I like the new guy, and like, oh, well, hey, we're from the original guy, and it was just this kind of nonsense argument that they had. That's what Paul calls it. He says, continuing in verse 6, he says, I planted, this is Paul talking, I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So neither he who plants nor he who waters is really anything, but only God who gives the growth. He who plants and he who waters are one, and each will receive his wages according to his labor. For we are God's fellow workers. You are God's field, God's building. He says, look, we're just doing our jobs, man. I mean, you can't say, well, I follow one and I follow the other. Really, what is the person who plants the seed without the person that waters it? If it's your job to plant seeds and no one comes along and waters it, what are you doing? And if you're watering a bunch of ground and there's no seeds in it, what are you doing? It takes this teamwork, right? And so Paul's going, you guys are ridiculous. Like, I planted a seed and then I kind of cultivated it and then walked away. And then Apollos came in and he watered you guys. And you guys are like, well, I'm of the watering guy. Like the plant guy didn't do anything. And the other people are like, well, Paul planted us. And like the water didn't help you at all either. So it's just this nonsense kind of conflict it was something that they were struggling with. And Paul sees that and he says, look, you guys are still worldly. You guys haven't developed yet. You're still finding all this conflict and stuff. And in it, you failed to see God's work in what you're doing. And because you failed to see it, you never grew. It stifled your growth. You just saw the conflict, or you didn't see conflict. You created conflict, and it stopped you in your tracks. So the truth is, it takes a village. It takes multiple perspectives. It takes different styles. I mean, we see that in ministry all the time. Around the office, you've got Pastor Jim and Pastor Dave and Pastor Marshall. Those guys couldn't be any different. Because I'll be in a meeting with Marshall, and we're having a serious conversation, and who comes in with his iPad, wants to show us a video from YouTube, and we're having a serious conversation. He goes, no, seriously, stop. You guys will love this. You guys will love this. And we're like, huh? He goes, you'll love this. And it's the video that we watched this morning. He's like, we got to do this. We got to do this in the morning. I go, okay, And then I'm in a meeting with Jim, and we're talking about something, and then Pastor Dave comes in, and he has a completely different take on what we're doing. And so you've got just you'll go, who to go to pretty much. If you know our pastors, you know who to go to for what, because they have different styles, and it depends on you and how you work, who you're going to go and talk to about different things. That's a blessing that we have. By having so many different pastors and different people that you can go to, there's a benefit. There's wisdom in the counsel of many, right? And so, but they're looking at it and they're going like, oh, I stick with this guy. And they missed out on that completely. And so they never benefited from it. Their growth just stopped. Paul's like, we're just doing our jobs, and take it or leave it, but don't pretend like the planter has something against the waterer, or like we're working in tandem. Okay. He continues on. According to the grace of God given to me, like a skilled master builder, I laid a foundation, and someone else is building upon it. Let each one take care of how he builds, for no one can lay a foundation other than that which was laid, which is Jesus Christ. So he says, he goes into this metaphor basically of our spiritual development being like a building that we build on the foundation of who Jesus is in our life. I love that. There's a nun in the 16th century. Her name was Teresa of Avila, and she wrote a book called The Interior Castle. And in it, she described your spiritual development. She said, you've got this castle inside you, and it's your job to build it and to grow it and to explore it and to clean it and to make sure that it's nice and beautiful. And it's about exploring like who you are in Jesus and who Jesus is to you, and just developing that. And so Paul takes a similar approach, and he's saying, look, you've got a foundation, and that's the only foundation that you can have. You could try to build stuff on nothing, and you'll have something for a minute. Like I could take my papers and I could crumble them up and go, look, I have something, until it hits the ground, and they go, yeah, it wasn't really anything, was it? The only foundation that you can actually have is Jesus. Everything else is just going to be it's going to be fleeting, and it's going to flutter away. If you're into, thing like New Age things and like Spiritism and stuff like that. If you know people that are like that, it's one thing one day, it's one thing the next day, then they're into astrology, and they're going like, I was born under this star, and you're going, really? Okay, cool. And so, it's just, they're all over the place. The only foundation, the only meaningful spiritual foundation that we can have is Jesus. And so he's talking to people who have Jesus, but they just haven't built anything good on that foundation. And it's not to say that they're supposed to add something to the gospel, but what you build on the foundation of Jesus is really how it comes out in your life. It's what you do with the gospel. And if you're not doing much with the gospel, like if you've got a little, shack or something, and it's pretty crummy, right? When stuff happens, like it feels like the three little pigs, when the wolf comes, right? You're doomed, okay? And so you got nothing. And but to be honest, like if that's you and something happens and it kind of shakes you up and you've got nothing left, but you still have Jesus, that's good. Build something new. Like build something better, okay? Because if it went completely away, clean slate, guys, clean slate. This time don't use straw, right? But the thing about it being a village and us being in this together is that it's not just about you and your spiritual development. It's not like the church is here to like pour into you and then you just go home feeling like, oh, I was poured into, right? It's a whole community effort, and it's not something that, although it's counterintuitive, I think, to think that that my spiritual development is not kind of a private issue that I work on, that it's like a solo project, but it's really not. And that's what Paul says. He says, according to the grace of God given to me, like a skilled master builder, I laid a foundation, and someone else is building upon it. That's how it works, is we help each other out. And so if you're here and you need to be poured into, hopefully everyone here wants to pour into you if they know that you need it, but you need to also be pouring into other people. And you need to go and help them build their interior castle on the structure of Jesus in their life. I mean, you need help too, but you need to help other people. And that's just how it works. And that's beautiful. That's this beautiful picture of us all just kind of working in this village full of all these, it's single foundation, but we've got all of these houses, all of these little castles that we're building and working on, and we're at different places. So we've got bad looking ones, and then we've got like beautiful ones, right? But none of them are done. But we've got different levels, and but when you go to show up to someone's castle and you want to help them out, you got to know first thing, what do they need? Like, what am I getting myself into? And then how am I equipped to help them? So if you show up with a plunger and they're doing all electrical work, you're not a lot of use, right? But if they got a clogged toilet, you could be like, I'm all over that, man. Because, in the grand scheme of like building a building on the foundation of Jesus in your life, if you've got plumbing and toilets and stuff like that, you're probably doing pretty good. But if you've got a clogged toilet and you never address it, it'll stink up the whole place, right? You have like all these nice things, but then it smells like poop. So if you got a plunger, you got to show up to someone's house and be like, I got you, man. You like that? Okay. So, continuing on. He says, now if anyone builds on the foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work will become manifest, for the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test what sort of work each one has done. And if the work that anyone has built on the foundation survives, he'll receive a reward. But if anyone's work is burned up, he will suffer loss, though he himself will be saved, but only as through fire. All right, so let's talk about that. First of all, what's going on with like gold, silver, precious stones? It has to do with value. It's like we were saying, big bad wolf, right? If you're building with straw and stuff, how much care are you actually putting into it? But if you're definitely not going to build, a bad structure. You're not going to have a crummy building if you're building with gold, right? And so the idea is the quality matters. I mean, it really does, because the fire's gonna come and it's gonna test the quality of your work. And I think fire means a few different things. I think, first of all, it means trials. It means tests of your faith. And it also means judgment. But when trials come and your faith is really tested, and the fire comes and you're like, hey, protect me. The hay is not going to protect you from a fire, right? The hay burns, right? It's probably more of a problem. You probably be better off just standing on Jesus and being like, okay, what am I going to do here, right? Well, the fire is going to burn up your wood and your hay and straw, although I don't know what the difference between hay and straw is. Anyone? Seeds, okay, yeah. That's what I thought. Yeah. The seeds? Okay. Got it. So hay is better than straw. Got it. Okay. So, yeah. Well, both of them are probably bad for building a house. So don't do it, okay? If you So if you're going to build something on the foundation of Jesus in your life, make it good. Like if you're going to build something good. Make sure your theology is consistent. Make sure that, what you believe about the Bible is consistent with what the Bible says. There's just all kinds of things like that. Make sure that you've got, in terms of you're like, well, how do I build a building on top of Jesus? Well, It's spiritual disciplines, it's prayer, it's fasting, it's tithing, it's fellowship, it's all these, it's spending time in the Word. It's just getting closer to God and letting the gospel change who you are and having that come out in your life. And so it's not hard. And it doesn't cost you anything, right? And there's not a better investment that you can make. But the quality matters. And when it comes to judgment, let's go back to trials. We all go through trials. And if you're growing, you're going to go through more trials. And so the quality of what you have, it matters a lot, because you don't want to build something and then have it go away, and then build something again and then have it go away. What Paul is saying in terms of judgment is that no matter what you build on the foundation of Jesus, you're saved. No matter what, if you have a genuine relationship with Jesus, no matter what you build on it, that foundation is good enough. But you should be building stuff on that, because he says, basically, the fire is going to come, and if it wipes out what you've built, you will suffer loss. You're going to be pulled out of the fire. Like the fire is, you're not going to be protected by what you've built. You're going to be pulled out of the fire. And so he's saying, it's, you're not protected from what comes, but you're going to make it, but just by the skin of your teeth. And so I don't believe that you can lose salvation, but it is, I would say, a legitimate Christian perspective to say that you can. And I don't believe that that's what the Bible teaches, but some people do, and that's legitimate. And so if that's possible, make sure you're building something good, right? Okay, because if that fire comes and you can lose your salvation, make sure you built something that's going to protect you, okay? So the quality matters, and there's this commercial that I love that really shows how quality matters, and so I would like you to watch it.
Find it? Yeah. All right, another one just like that. Right in the old bucket. Good toss. See, that's much better. That was good. You had your shoulder pointed, you kept your eyes on your target. Let's do it again. Watch me. Just like that one.
The durability of the Volkswagen Passat. Passed down something he will be grateful for.
Good arm.
That's the power of German engineering.
Back to you.
So, if you're gonna build something good. And if you've got kids and you can't pass Jesus on to your kids. All you can do is share the gospel with them, be an example to them, and just pray really hard. That's all that you can do. But if you're, and same thing with your coworkers and things like that, you can't just give them Jesus. Like, look what I got you for Christmas. It's Jesus. So it's not like a car. It's not like a German car that you can just like deed to your children or just buy and then give away to someone. It's something that you have to work on. And the way that you can help people see that is by being spiritually developed yourself, and by being a good example, and just be a model to the people that are in your life of what that looks like and how important it is. You can share the gospel with people, and you can, but there are all kinds of people in this room that have already heard the gospel and have already received the gospel. And so, though you can't give it to someone, there's people that have already taken it, and they're here, and they need you to pour into them. They need you to help them out. There's people in this room right now that are struggling with all kinds of things. It's me, it's you, it's you, it's you, it's all of us. We all struggle, and that's why, we need everyone else. When you see someone and you say hi, pour into them with just a little bit more. Take like that one extra step and say like, how are things going? And if someone asks you that, don't be like, oh, it's good, but your life's terrible, right? Tell them how things are going, because if we genuinely care for each other, and we should genuinely want to help them out. Hold people accountable. It's not just about giving them a hug. Sometimes it's about spanking their butt. Some people need to be punished. Seriously, some people need to be disciplined in love. If you've got a friend, you've got someone in the church, and they need to be disciplined, you should love them enough to discipline them. And if you're being disciplined by someone, you should appreciate it. Okay? Now, if they're just beating you up, let me know. And I'll let Jim know, and he'll show him who's boss. There's not a thing I can do about it. But the key to the whole thing is just to keep building. Because you're never done. And the minute you think that you're done, you're like, yeah, I got it. Man, like that's a signal. That should be a signal to you that you don't have it. I mean, you should see yourself as the Christians in Corinth who are like, yeah, we got this thing. We're all spiritually gifted and stuff. And he's going, you guys have no idea. You're arguing about like the planter and the waterer. Like that doesn't make any sense. You guys, you're not there. And so we should all be, no matter where you are. So again, it goes back to know where you are. Like, and be honest with yourself. Like it's not something that you're going to put on your Facebook timeline that everyone's going to comment on, right? Just be honest with yourself about where you are in your spiritual life. You know, are you still on formula? You know, are you on baby food? And then what's it going to take another step farther, just to go one step farther, just a step at a time, and just push yourself a little bit, because you can't go from milk to steak or meatloaf or something. That's going to ruin you. You have to take a little step at a time and stretch yourself. So maybe the only thing that you do for your spiritual development is go to church. Maybe that's the only thing that you do. It's not enough. But if that's the only thing that you do, take a personal assessment. Is that growing you? Are you challenged by that? Is that stretching you spiritually? Because it's like muscles. When they grow, in order to grow muscles, you have to break the muscle fibers. And so when they break, they actually grow back bigger. I haven't done that in a long time. But I know how it works, right? I should be nice to me one of these times. But that's how muscles work. And so it's similar with your spiritual development. You have to, you're not going to just rip everything apart and be like, oh, it's going to be so big when it grows back together. It's not going to grow back together. You got a torn muscle, right? But to take careful steps that stretch you. If you do a devotional in the morning, or you do a quiet time or anything like that, and it's kind of like I could sleep through my devotional. If it's not stretching you, do something else. Get a different one. If you're like, oh, I heard this before. Oh, I've heard this story before. Do something else. Do something that's going to stretch you, that's going to pull you. Find out some of the variety, some of the liberties that we have in our faith, and pour into that. And so, but if you're no matter where you are, if it's milk or if it's meat or salmon or whatever, no matter where you are, if you're not going farther than that, you're going to backslide. And you're going to slide back, and you're going to become complacent in your faith, and you're going to end up kind of being numb to your whole spiritual condition. Okay? So push harder, press on, keep building. None of us, we're not done. Know where you are. Be surrounded by people who love you enough to spank you when you need it, and hug you when you need it, and support you and listen to you, and just walk with you as you try to grow spiritually. People that are dragging you down, if you're hanging around people and you're thinking like, oh, after being around them, it's harder to pull someone up than it is to pull someone down, like they say. And if you're hanging around people and they're a drag on you spiritually, find some people that you can hang out with who are going to build you up. People that understand, I'm trying to grow spiritually. I'm trying to grow spiritually. And so I don't need you to come in and be like, antagonizing me or like tempting me with, other kinds of things. I need someone who's going to be there and support me as I try to become more and more like Jesus. And that the ultimate building that you can build on the foundation of Jesus is who Jesus was, who Jesus is. And so becoming more and more like Jesus is the goal, and we're never going to get there. We're never going to get there. Paul says, I've not yet achieved perfection, but I'm pressing on toward that goal. I'm trying really hard to get there. And so none of us is there. We're not done. Challenge yourself, and then the flip side of that, minister to others. Be there for other people when they need you, and just love on them. And so if you're a drag, just be honest with yourself. If you're a drag on the people around you, they're trying to grow spiritually, and you're like sucking the life out of them, cut it out. Just don't do it anymore. If they're trying to grow, stop it. And you can, but even someone that's got a little shack can walk over with a plunger and help someone else out. And that's what we should be doing. It doesn't matter where you are. You can always help someone else out. Sometimes it's just listening. Sometimes it's just listening. So this morning, we've been talking about, once you have Jesus, building on the foundation. And that's the key to spiritual development, honestly. It's knowing where you are, pushing yourself to be beyond that, surrounding yourself with people who support you, and then ministering to others. That's it. It's not complicated. And if we do it right, it's this beautiful picture. But if you don't know Jesus, if you're here this morning and you got dragged here or something, or if I've been talking about kind of where you are spiritually, and just being honest with yourself about that, and you're kind of taking a personal inventory and you're going, I don't know. I don't know if I have a foundation in my life that I can build on. I just don't know. There are probably 200 people in this room who would love to share the gospel with you. So just ask. Just ask someone. Anyone. And then we can just be there to love on each other. And, who in here is not willing to share the gospel with someone? Good, okay. So everyone in this building is willing to share the gospel with you if you need to know it. If you want to know about Jesus, or if you just come to a place right now where you're going, I need Jesus. Pastor Jim would love to talk to you. I would love to talk to you. Everyone in this room would love to talk to you. So just find someone and ask. As the worship team comes back up, I'm going to close this in prayer. And I just want, and the ushers prepare for ushering. I just want to thank you guys, because what we've been doing in VBS is not something that the church does for you. It's not something that was brainstormed in a dark room that we go we're going to do that to our church, right? It's something that we've been able to do together. And whether you know it or not, it's your serving that allows us to do that. You could say I don't serve at all over there with the children. But if you serve at all, that allows us to do this, because if you weren't serving there, we couldn't have those people serving over there. Does that make sense? You've only got, in your volunteer economy, you've only got a certain number of people that are out there. And so when you serve, no matter where that is, that allows us to do ministries like this. And the same thing for your ministry where you serve. Other people serving in other areas allows that to happen. And it's your faithful giving that allows us financially to be able to support something like VBS and watch kids come to Christ in a ministry like that just in five Sundays. And so thank you guys very much. We thanked all the VBS volunteers. They've been amazing. We thanked Cindy. She's phenomenal. I'd just like to thank you guys. So thank you guys very much for supporting this church and the ministries of this church. And I'm going to clap for you. So let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, just thank you so much for this morning. Again, I just thank you for everyone who's here. I thank you just for a simple message that just comes straight out of the Word, straight into my heart, and straight into the hearts of the people that are sitting in these chairs. I just pray that you're moving in us this morning and challenging us to grow, and that you're pulling on our hearts and pushing us forward, that we can't be complacent, Lord. Don't let us be complacent with where we are. And I just thank you for Jesus. Lord, I thank you for what he has done for us. I thank you for your love, that you love me is something it's so hard for me to wrap my head around sometimes. And I just thank you that you love each of us, and that you loved us enough to send Jesus. And Lord, I just ask that you bless our time this afternoon in the picnic. I just ask that nobody gets hurt on the water slide. And I just thank you this morning. If there are people here who are just dying and need to know the gospel, they just need to come to you, Lord. I just pray that you just give them the words in their heart and the confidence to be able to walk up and ask somebody, Lord. I just thank you so much for your word and for the message this morning. In Jesus' name, amen.